Madhu was talking about what are you guys have done here, right? So Raghu was involved in the initial days of CAE here, and if you guys have heard of a lot of things about Intel Challenge in PS last year, he is one of the guys from the Intel side who was also part of that, right? So, and interestingly, he is building a product around healthcare sitting inside Intel, right? And it has a lot of challenges, opportunities, right? So we'll discuss, right? So that's one. Then Prashanth is, he says he's not a techie, but he has seen more techie than more tech than any of us. So I don't believe it, but he's from Harvard. That's he's from Harvard. Right? So he runs one of the largest conglomerate in the healthcare space today. Right? So very close to startups, very close to startup innovation in healthcare. He has told us we will not divulge any secrets, right? So it's for you guys to see how you can extract that. This one, right? So, but as you know, healthcare is one of our core focus area, and I'm sure the video will reach some of the hospitals. So we also do what we are doing here in partnership with some of the large hospitals and healthcare universities like yes, DLE, right? In fact, with Rajiv Gandhi Healthcare University, we are trying to partner with them and then create healthcare startups in partnership with the engineers and doctors and so on and so forth. We are trying to do. So, as a fund, we have lots of focus on healthcare, but even otherwise, we have seen, right? So, there are two areas. We have lots of background, right? And you guys know, let's start with my just take some introductory notes and then let's start with the conversation.
Like what Suresh was talking about 23 years ago. I graduated from Harvard College of Engineering, and Suresh saying that I did cricket for RCE, and the biggest competition in the lot of that healthcare for the last 5 years. That United Healthcare has currently with Optum, which is part of United Health Group overall. Prior to that, it was with HP and ANZ Bank. Diagnostic professional, providing industry platform diagnostic professional, providing industry platform diagnostic influence in terms of your mindset and perspective. And that's what I want to get over. I call myself being a specialist, but healthcare has given me a lot much more insight in terms of what I've been exposed to the last 5 years. It's enormous. The best thing is, it's not just about generating revenue for organizations, it's about making a difference to patients or members all across, right? And that's where a whole lot of personalization comes across in terms of perspective. And that's exactly where I feel that the next generation can thrive upon. And I believe that I personally like to be in that space, contribute to the space, and kind of take it forward in terms of more disruptive landscape. So that's about me. I don't want to too much into that, and I'll be stuck towards me. Throw everything towards him. I'm like, we use technology. I have basically he is trying to do with students with innovation and entrepreneurship. The 2 years that I spent with students in PS, this was 2019-2020. The details are there on the CI website. Pretty good experience. A bunch of you folks also are interns in our team. So pretty good experience with PS. So myself, more than healthcare. I would characterize myself as a AI expert. Solutions at the edge. That's where most data center, which is well Google's and Amazon's doing it. And healthcare finance and we get excellent insights of AI at the edge. Right? Now, specifically, that presents an excellent opportunity to combine AI. But that's what I've been doing the past 2 years, interacting quite a bit with the hospitals, ecosystems, the medtech companies, as I'm going to do the discussion today.
But before that, the India ecosystem has always interested me. Though, what is Intel doing in healthcare? And that's a question that I get when I was doing language NLP solutions before this. What is Intel doing in NLP? Before that, I was working with the other ecosystem. Working around the UPI stack. In fact, some of the security related aspects, I've done some contributions there. So I wanted to know what is Intel doing there, because I think expectation is you give the hardware and it's good off. But you can do a lot more.
And this was part of the company.
Hopefully that's really
So, excellent, right? So I want to start with the conversation now. It can be generic, right? Even if it is generally around AI and hardware. So, in fact, I expressed my views that I want to create one hardware company, get one hardware company. Right? So, anyway, right? What are the opportunities that you see for students to build startups in this area? Right? So, I hope.
Yeah. See, healthcare, I would say, is not a easy domain in the sense of taking your product to the market. There's a long incubation period. You need to be patient. You need to be healthcare. Right? It's not like you start a SaaS company 2 years down the line, you are X dollar evaluation and then sell. And no, healthcare doesn't work in short cycles. I mean, I've worked with, in fact, it's a long incubation period, you need other patients. And that is incubation period, you need other patients. And that is absolutely important. Now, what are the opportunities? Actually, India is a pretty good place from a technology incubation perspective, because you look at US, right? When you go to the hospitals and start looking at what the government of India is doing with the Ayushman digital mission. A lot of money will be spent in ensuring that hospitals have the basic infrastructure to even digitize their day-to-day operation. Right from my sister is a doctor, one of her pet peeves is every day I have to spend a lot of time writing the patient records. And I don't want to keep writing, it's better spent on patients. In fact, that's a wrong usage of the doctor's time. Whereas in the West, you don't have the doctors writing at the end of the day, transcribe and they speak, and it's voice to text kind of a solution across the hospital space, right from your emergency response, ICUs, patient monitoring, like the hospital administrative systems, to the patient discharge and what do you monitor the patient post the discharge. Opportunities all over the place. Is it only in the hospitals? No. Even the patient to pharma. Even that part is, a lot of disruptions are happening. It's not just AI and hardware. People are bringing blockchain into pharma to basically manage the supply chain. Right? India is one of the pharma hubs. Drug discovery, clinical trials are a big thing. Today, drug discovery, the entire process to get one drug to the market, takes around $2 billion and 15 years. And that sounds pretty atrocious, right? 15 years for one drug at $2 billion. And if it is, and it's not like every time you invest $2 billion, a drug comes up, because there's a lot of failures too. On an average, it's roughly, if I recollect the numbers, right, 30% is what is the success rate, right? And most of the drug discoveries fails, pretty much late into the system. By which time they have spent 70-80% of the money, right? So even if it's a failed drug, they have spent 1.3-1.4 billion dollars kind of a thing, right? Most of that can be solved with, some of the digital transformations, the data related to it. Again, we can talk about the use cases. Short point is, in terms of opportunities, depending upon what your background, your skill sets, your area of focus is, the playing field is pretty wide in healthcare. But the key ingredient there is patience. Nothing happens in a matter of a few years.
Totally agree with what Raghu just kind of mentioned. I think he went into deeper nuances of hardcore technology. Where I stand, from my experiences, the three tenets, which actually works across with the US healthcare as well, which is predominantly more aligned with any sort of a startup, especially healthcare domain, across geographies as well. The first one would be, how do you reduce the cost of care, right? And that's something that is happening across with every single country, every single healthcare provider, hospitals included, right? The second one is in terms of how do you basically improve the patient experience, right? Today, what we lack, especially in India altogether, is it's very haphazard in terms of you go to corporate hospitals like your Asters and your Apollos versus some other, hospitals, right? The care in terms of experience for the patient itself is very different. The corporate hospitals behave in a different way, and then the normal hospitals behave in a different way, right? And also in terms of how do you drive patient outcomes, right? That's something of the three tenets, which is pretty prevalent in terms of any sort of a healthcare organization altogether. And every nuance that Raghu touched upon in terms of digital transformation, your EMR consolidation, data lakes as a service, is something that which comes across as a subset which enables this particular tenets to go forward. But for budding entrepreneurs who are here, who are looking at making healthcare, disruption in healthcare altogether, these three tenets is something that I would want to leave it with you guys as something carved on stone to look at these three things, right? Reduce the cost of care, how you reduce the cost of care, how you improve the patient outcomes, and how you boost the patient experience. And the other thing which I want to say, and again we'll talk more so in the next half hour or so, is something that what I see in terms of my experience is, and I definitely feel it's a fantastic disruption happening, right? From my past background, also based on research, e-commerce and retail has got a lot of disruption going. Where does that revolve around? That revolves around consumers, right? Now it moves from being multi-channel to becoming omni-channel. What is multi-channel? Customer engagement, right? You need multi-channel in terms of retail and in terms of e-commerce to have multi-channel in a mode to engage the customer. What is omni-channel? It's end of the day, it's a customer experience. Now imagine the same tenets of retail and e-commerce moving into healthcare. That's where the huge disruptions happen in terms of having consumerism in the center of healthcare altogether, right? And that's not only for companies like us in terms of Optum or United brings in revenues, but also a lot in terms of patient outcomes, right? So I would, like I said, I won't delve deeper into too much of technological nuances, but from a business standpoint, these are something that tenets for every one of you guys who are looking at healthcare as a startup and disruption that you would want to do it. It's fantastic. And the last thing which I want to talk about is based on my own and triple IT Hyderabad. One of the things which comes across is I've personally seen some extremely deep health tech disruption from very, very bright students. Problem is, we start with brilliance, the deployment execution comes in, and that's when it is the US or Europe. But like what Raghu said, which is coming through, you need to be patient to kind of help iteratively progress on that particular aspect. It's patient to kind of help iteratively progress on that particular aspect and stay invested and don't let it discount. That's my 2 cents to the question. Hope that makes sense.
Right, I think that's a good link to the next question that I wanted to ask. If you consider retail consumer business, right? Because it's a consumer, whatever you do, consumer has to go and pick up that product, right? So as long as consumer wants it, right, that's why the stuff will follow in retail. Unfortunately, healthcare is not like that, right? So as much as we talk about patient experience, right, we know, whether it's in US or here, we know the state of patient experience. Right? It's really horrible to get a checkup even today, even in the best of the hospitals after we pay bill that runs into lakhs, right? So the question that I have is for the entrepreneurs who wants to break into healthcare, there are multiple entry points, right? So it's not about okay, the consumers wants it as a consultant, or is it small hospitals, or is it large hospital conglomerates, or is it pharma, or is it much more complicated supply chain in healthcare than, let's say, retail or manufacturing. It's a big network, right? What to suggest
It's a good question, right? So again, I would look into it not putting a finger on it immediately, right? I would look at more situational, right? Again, differs from people to people. But again, my experience has been from a US healthcare perspective, which is a much more regulated industry. But I'm just trying to derive the nuances from there to Indian demographic perspective, right? Wherever I see, at least personally, this is my personal opinion only, wherever I see a lot of disruption in terms of healthcare style, is today, see, I just,
It could be for you. So, and I would be equally happy with
sure. See, the thing is, where I definitely see is in terms of, there is personally, I've evaluated certain healthcare which kind of works in the spectrum of wellness. Right? Lot of passion in terms of wellness, which we call as something known as value-based care. Right? But the majority of the opportunities that we see in healthcare is population health management. Right? Ideally, so from when we talk about from our US perspective, you look at what is the spectrum of 60 plus. So we have Medicare and retirement, we have community states, and a lot of things across the US. How do you grapple with the situation of chronic illness, right? When the mortality rate increases, how do you deal with chronic illness? How do you basically predict that a person of X age living in X city is going to basically have a heart attack based on his vitals to remote monitoring, right? That combined with value-based is more progressive, right? When you say, for example, somebody who's got maybe a lung cancer patient, how do you have cessation of smoking built into a predictive modeling through an app of cleanliness, but also progressive? We're looking at things. It's an iterative progression of both as a subset of what is it. So again, not is an iterative progression of both as a subset of what is it. So again, not a confusion based. What I would basically start with is to look at what is the population health management strategy. Where does the curve of the majority of the curve or the clusters of mortality rates are? For what? And how do we have an incisive strategy to basically get there? Is it type A or type B sort of diabetes, right? We have a sugar producing organization for that, right? Secondly, in terms of trying to say that. So again, like I said, I won't get into details of how do you want to do EMR consolidation. Do you want to put in a SaaS model across the cloud and try to make it available across the diagnostics or medical imaging facilities through an NLP or a computer vision based predictive modeling? Because that doesn't make sense if we get it, because we are racking ourselves into a use case. What I do definitely feel is you guys don't need the use case right now. You need a clear, incisive method as to what does the spectrum look like and where do you have a level playing field. So that's where I try to start. And the second is definitely, again, when Suresh was talking about from a US perspective, a lot of disruption in terms of, I don't know whether you guys know from a US healthcare perspective, there's part A, part B, parts, which is because RX, right? In terms of automation, somebody who's over and living in a remote area in the US, how do you manage that in a predictive modeling perspective? How do you have a report patient monitoring through available chip or available stack, and that basically gives you sort of an insight into what drug could be required before something else happens, right? So these I would definitely feel, taking that nuances from our US healthcare to Indian healthcare is something that the disruption can take place in terms of what the level playing field in the spectrum looks like.
Yeah, I had a very good technology spin on that. Right? See, there are two ways you can start. One is you are a technologist, you think you are good with AI, show me data and I will give you some AI insights. That's one way to start. The other way to start is you have a deep insight into a particular problem statement that you want to address with the technology. Right? Now, in my experience, the latter is better than the former. You have the hammer and everything kind of has to look like an egg way to fix it, right? So when this is born from experience, right? Because as a technologist, one of the problem statements we are looking at is, and this is irrespective of India, US, or whatever, right? Is hospitals have data, right? And we do need data for AI, but because of those regulatory reasons, hospitals cannot just move the data out of their premises. There's a bunch of regulatory requirements, HIPAA standards, and others, that kind of ensure requires them to invest in certain infrastructure. So most of the hospitals, much better in US and Europe, but totally absent in India. So you just cannot move the data, which means that how do you aggregate data without moving the data? because AI needs the data to be aggregated at some level. So we said, okay, and I said, okay, let's do federated learning. And I had federated learning, data research where it is, great. So we said, yeah, then we went to hospitals in India and we said, look, we have solved it, federated learning is there, why don't you go and deploy it? And they said, look, where is our digital data in the first place? I have most of my doctors writing in descriptions. Where is the digital form of it, right? As it turned out, the EMR, VHR system, EMR systems, they are not there at all, right? One of the biggest, next 2-3 years, the biggest opportunity, basically is a pivot. Then the pivot, then, of course, as Intel, I can't get into EMR at all. But for an EMR company, the immediate thing would be to kind of get into, say, IQVA kind of a company, right? So IQVA will more start with an EMR solution, have their footprint into the hospitals, and through that footprint in hospital, then roll out all the digital solutions that they have. Right? So the point is, if you start from a technology end, you don't appreciate the problem statements. The other aspect of it is, the one instance where I started from the problem statement itself, the use case. One of the use cases during COVID was the doctor-patient consult, right? And that's when the telemedicine really took off. And there were telemedicine kiosks. Look at China too. China is one of the most evolved when it comes to telemedicine kiosks and all that, right? So China has those almost like AI in a box, AI in AI doctor, whatever they call it, right? AI in a box kind of a thing, doctor in a box. Right? They have those solutions, but in the Indian context, the problem is, people first of all say that let's talk about a kiosk. Right? A kiosk wherein somebody has to get his vitals. Okay, maybe I'll take a step back. But any telemedicine is not successful, in my opinion, if it's only the first consult you're doing on the telemedicine. But telemedicine as a means is successful only if a doctor can finish the consult on video. Right? Today, a doctor can say, who are you? What are your vitals? Yeah, please come to the hospital. Is where the hospital is where the consult ends. So if you can finish the consult on the telemedicine device or environment, that's a success. So for that, you do need a set of vitals to be captured. Now, during COVID, one of the biggest problem statement, as it turned out, is we benefit. We have the assortment of vitals. Why don't you try it out? Then the feedback was, it's COVID, no touch. What will you do? That translated into a problem statement to develop telemedicine kiosks without where the vitals can be captured without touching the patient, right? The wireless, remote, RF based, whatever it is, right? The point is, so what I'm trying to say is, from a technologist perspective, it's always better to understand the problem statement. Again, as I said earlier, we do have a lot of problem statements across the entire healthcare space. But whatever area you pick, ensure that you understand the problem statement first, then apply the required technology to it and another area.
So, which basically what you are saying is, if you want to do anything in AI and healthcare, you just your time talking to any Indian hospital.
Short answer is yes, but I can get into the again to the credit of some of the private hospitals. There are hospitals which are investing a lot into technology. So I will not take anything away from that. But to a large extent, let me just say that in India the problem statement starts even before when it comes to AI, right? It starts even before the data being available. Right? You need to address that problem statement before you can get into the the database, whatever solution you want to provide.
In fact, it's amazing how some of these technologies, for example, one of our companies, federated learning was more important, not because hospitals should lose the data, because we were paying that we lose the data. Right? So, the same solution. But I just want to continue with that conversation. Right? In the architect in the channel. The reason why I spoke about if you want to build an AI, don't go to hospitals, etc., because this is what you will end up hearing from them. Right? So sometimes when you go and talk to Indian customers and then try to build a solution, right? So go and try to build a solution. The problem is you may be building a solution which will take 2-3 years, and by the time you complete that solution, the whole infrastructure would have changed, because India has the tendency to leapfrog its infrastructure. And so you are neither your customers who gave you the problem statement will buy, And anyway, for the US, they would have changed too, right? So they are the enough guys who have built the solution by that. So that's the challenge that I was trying to address. But anyway, right? So where I was trying to get to is that it is purely from the engineering perspective, right? So as startups, as investors, we will always tell them, first be lane, find out something which is deep enough, at the same time simple enough, because of which you will be able to get to the market as early as possible. But both of you warned me more than them, you warned me saying that you need to have a lot of patience before they generate any revenue, right? So that's a point that you made, but unfortunately, that's not the way startups can work. Right? So they need to, especially their students, they need to build a solution, get to the market. So there is always a trade-off in terms of what kind of engineering they can do. Right? So I want to hear from you, right? How should they plan their engineering, right? So because you are building stuff in Intel, right, which has its own challenges, and then you are seeing how some other startups work. How do you suggest them to plan their engineering, right? What is the right, we call it Suvarna Madhyama, right? What is the right approach that you suggest them to take as startups to build their product?
Maybe a short answer, and I can get deep into it later on. Short answer is, don't develop anything in isolation. Don't develop it in your own premises, and then once it is done, go take it to an hospital and deploy it. Right? Co-develop. If you have a problem statement that has a resonance with a certain player, if you have a problem statement that has a resonance with a certain player in the healthcare industry, go co-develop with them. Of course, it has its business implications in terms of what co-development means. Assuming that that is taken care of separately, co-development, and periodic pilots, really, because you touched upon a very interesting point, which is with respect to the transformations that happens. So you do co-developing it, remaining closer to the deployment space ensures that many of those pivots transfer because of the transformations, can be done quickly. Rather than to be surprised after going from your lab after 2 years.
I'll give a slightly different business spin on what the question Suresh asked and what Raghu said, right? So, ideally, if you look at the life cycle of the entire startup, you start with a bootstrap, then you have a pre-series, then you have a series A, right? Ideally, pre-series or series A is when you actually have a MVP, ideally an MVP, right? How do you develop an MVP? Let's get into a bit more into it, right? So this is exactly where the core technologists become very passionate, right? MVP is not about adding bells and whistles, right, in terms of the customer story. You have to get a minimum viable product, right? That itself, based on my experience, I've seen a lot of passion goes in that. Now, when the passion goes across in a particular channel, what the business or what the person tends to forget from a business standpoint is how well are you leveraging the market, right? Let's take this. I mean, it's a cutthroat market, right? Let's look into this first. If I'm going to be an investor, how passionate that you guys maybe are in terms of building up the product or something like that. I'm looking at trying to cash out. If I'm going to be entering a pre-series or series A, putting in X amount of dollars, what am I looking at? A minimum 25% buyer? Or if I'm going to be looking at an ecosystem of a VC, I'm looking at trying to sell exit at a 40%. Why I'm bringing this is a reality case, right? Technology definitely plays a part, but you need to basically look at what does the market look like for you. What sort of disruption are you getting? End of the day, while the disruption actually happens, the progressive elaboration of your product or your company depends upon which is your next funding series will come by. Otherwise, you're going to remain bootstrapped and pre-series A throughout, and that's going to basically die a very natural death, right? So what I tend to say more in elaborate what I try to say is, have an eye on the market. Have an eye on what your next series funding looks like. Is your MVP is going to be relevant towards that? And what Suresh just talked about is very, very clear, right? They say you have to basically evolve and transform your business in the flight. You can't basically hold on to, say, an emerging technology like a blockchain or IoT and get hooked onto it. If the market is not viable for that particular product and somebody is not buying it, you can't be passionate to hold on to it because you're going to have a natural death on that, right? So what I would say, encapsulated across in a much more relevant manner, is to have your 85% on the market. When I say market, what is the evolution of your product or your service, ideally product, in terms of what will be your GTM? When I say GTM, is a go-to-market strategy. What will be your pricing? Have an idea on that. Have an idea in terms of what will be your pricing is. There is something called as evolutionary pricing, there is skimming pricing, there is penetrative pricing. When you actually have an idea as to say this product will fetch me X amount of dollars. Now I'll tell you an example, right? I was blown away about 2 months ago when I was in NSRL I forget the gentleman's name, right? He actually came in Shark Tank, India. He has developed an ECG machine which provides 99.9% accurate data for 6,500 rupees. And that's available on Amazon and through an app. I forget the app, and I will probably send it across later. Stunning, right? I forget the name of that Meta gentleman. And you should see the confidence that person brought in. All the 4 sharks invested in him. He came to us as part of Optum and United Healthcare. He said, look, I don't need investment. I need you to get me a go-to-market to the US market. Can you make that happen? I love the confidence he had. It's not overconfidence, it's a self-confidence, right? That's where exactly I advise each and every entrepreneur sitting in this team to look into it. Have the confidence of trying to say, where is my GTM going to bring in the revenues as well as a spread in terms of my product? Do not get passionate, just be passionate about technology, but have an eye on the market, have an eye on your funding, have an eye on your overall progression of the product. That's what I personally see.
I think you answered my next question that I wanted to ask you. Right? How easy it is for them to work with the principal, or should they go to the? This was the question that I wanted to ask, but you answered it pretty well. I hope you guys heard. Wait, you can go and reach out to him. With that, go and watch that video so you know what is the exact confidence with which you should go and talk to him. Right? Okay, so this is thanks for answering that, by the way. Right? So the next question that I had was a lot of, which is also the concern of the experts. You have a much better chance to build that. There are, of course, as far as the infrastructure level, etc., I can still focus on the Indian market. India, there is a lot more money in even the primary healthcare centers, etc. There is still a lot of opportunities in India. But if you want to build something in the deep tech, right, and if you want to have a reasonably solid outcome in terms of the exit, right, you are better off focusing on the US market, right? And you run, as I've done, you run some other labs here, right? You run some other etc. And because you are focusing on the US market, right, your chance of working with the actual customer is extremely low, right? Even if when you are working with someone, you don't know whether it's a right customer or not, which you never know. Like, you know that a surgeon in Manipal is probably reasonably good at delivering put here. So what do you suggest? Teams that want to focus on US market, whether it's healthcare, because you have seen also lots of other stuff, who wants to focus on US market, but operate out of here, right? And unfortunately, in the initial days, they can't have a product manager sitting out of US, right? So how do you see any solution to this challenge?
That's a good question, and I will not passionately answer a bit more on this one because this is something that we are doing right now, right? So while I manage the business as well, I'm also a part of an evolutionary or revolutionary initiative within Optum called as Optum Startup Studio, right? So there's 3 prongs we are looking at. So one is for the US market, one is for the European market, and one is for the Indian market. We've already kickstarted a lot of cohorts in terms of evolving startups across in deep tech in the US, together with the association with Carnegie Mellon University. Here we are tied up with Triple IT Hyderabad as well, with CIA and SSI. So to the question that you posed, Suresh, honestly, to be quite honest, the deep tech knowledge which our entrepreneurs bring in, it's just not in the US market. There's a lot much more here. And I'm passionate about the Indian market. What I always tend to say as a double-edged sword is, like I said it in the beginning of the conversation as well, when you actually have a perfect amalgamation of product, technology, market, right? That gives you a fine footprint in terms of how you leverage the market altogether, right? Be it US, be it India, whatever. Indian market, as what Suresh talked about, the regulations are not very well regulated as compared to Europe or US. But if there is, this is not like bringing horse to water, right? It's about ensuring, saying that you have a product market fit, as well as a very disruptive product which has already been invested upon. That basically takes the precedence in terms of how you capture the market, and regulations will automatically follow, right? And that's where exactly I'm very passionate about, being associated with, my organization, Optum Studio. I'm seeing amazingly bright entrepreneurs who are bringing in absolutely AI-based deep tech nuances in there. My request to them, and when we have our networking conversations afterwards, is trying to say, don't ever let the foot pedal, off when not looking at the market. So, just a right context on this one, Suresh. What I'm trying to say is, irrespective of markets, I think if we follow that tenet of saying that how do you bring in a product which captures the market imagination, regulations will already follow, and that will also capture the market imagination. This is my personal way of looking at things.
I think we are time up. Okay. Any questions, please? Or else you guys, and some of you will have one-to-one. Please do that. And thanks, Prashanth. It was a short conversation, but I want to give more time for one-to-one and for them to talk to you guys. Thanks for being here, and best of luck.